Continuation with my list of principal political perceptions. Principle 21. The first principle of wrongdoing on the planet, Eve versus Adam. Protocol Adam and Eve does appear as left-handed versus right-handed, where it can be noticed increased devotion to support left-handed approach, which literally refers to alternative to right-hand approach in all of the ways in which it should not mean something like that. So I would call it second-hand approach because I have been having it plenty in my life, so I know exactly what it is and what it stands for. Another parallel can be referring to movements of the clockwise versus anti-clockwise. In Harry Potter's movies, there is a well-presented phenomenon of going to the wall or on the other side of the wall. Would that means also on the other side of correctness or on the other side of the realm. Parallel society, protocol existing on Earth for some time, located in its own adventurous mindset. We of course talk here about going on the other side of what by most was perceived as logical and reasonable, and testing intelligence therefore as what is logical, what most of us perceive as logical and reasonable, yet all that being done very much still holding strong connection to what is actually logical and reasonable, and ending to act more as indulged fools, very similarly actually how unemployed overindulged men would relate versus correct approaches to life, as for example versus a woman looking after kids, and any other person being seriously engaged in whatever activities that would to them be seriously important. That we talk about sober approaches to life versus more spoiled behavior or overindulged members of societies finding the previous as trivial and banal. I noticed that by certain members of socialism society as well, trying to quickly catch up with the rest of the world, copying all of the wrong aspects, as that is what mainstream culture was suggesting, by the way. And I somehow found myself inclined to look at these people as being sick and have been treating them as being in condition of mental sickness. And that's not far away from reality in substance. Yet noticeably it would be managing from what in times would emerge as specific tissue of English aristocracy as overindulging, overspoiled and increasingly Eve process that continue with speed of light and exactly in same pathway, so it will need to be noticed and marked accordingly, as in substance develops into black hole that is endangering to overtake the entire world. In substance driven on Shia population of Iran and into what that population transforms within some kind of historic pathways, I'm going to say. So here the phenomena is that the overindulged society are now replicating their formula over the original matrix territories, where we might argue that initially there is no at all such kind of intention. Yet because the West today recruits, it happens as a phenomenon where they end up with the speed of light immediately on the trace of a road to be awarded, regretfully on all of the wrong ways and on the account of the real drivers of civilization. Regretfully and unfortunately, it has become doomsday of humanity itself, and it will need to be reported, no matter how accidentally happens. It has become event of such size that will need to catch our attention and to be addressed accordingly. Therefore, at the point of Western indulged societies that then are teaching the rest of spreading their school all the way to the source land and basically set them on the wrong trace initially by offering top money and top positions. I wouldn't say that they are doing that deliberately. I think it has become a phenomenon on its own that started to roll on within its own logic since we found this world solidly existing in protocol of jungle that has become a rather chosen pathway for this kind of population. My Adam and Eve protocol looks, however, differently, and clearly would develop differently. If dictated by the source, not by the end line of English aristocracy. Being born of mixed bloodline, it would be flowing in my veins blood of both identities, one more sober, the other that I would recognize as inclined to more hypnotic state of mind, magical state of mind, very often I call romantic call it romantic state of mind, dreamer state of mind. I wouldn't give that credit to other Eve for eternity, which makes Eve closer to some extreme forms. But I cannot give a stamp to something that would end up calling itself more of the above when it is less of the above. We will be talking about importance of crossbreed, and that is what brings cross to such magnificent level of monument in last 2 millenniums, which planetary population continues to ignore. That in fact is reference to breed and breeding bloodlines, and then of course it's going to bring on the table entire palette of issues that I am bringing today, and that becomes in substance very much about managing of the code of human and human civilization and attending it. And I will never agree that such places would be reasonably held by territories that exist as provinces on this planet, when it is in question our overall civilizational development. And don't give me your ancient monuments, you are now present in this discussion, and I want to hear you now. Yet I'm still the one leading this discussion while you are all over the place. You cannot even bring your mind at one point, here being this planet. That continues to be your major problem. So what then we are talking about? How possibly we have ended in the world where provinces ended to be convinced that something like that can be justifiable, that they can hold some kind of supervision, authority position from living and existing on such peripheral platform territories. How they merge to such point of civilizational validation, to the point of principle, being principle decision-making authorities out there, where the central plateau has become literally like some kind of targeted event. Well, it is time to ask, excuse me, but targeted by whom? Do we know what on earth lands on provinces? These are vast territories, hardly attended, and even if someone would like to use that word, as it is attending something, I doubt they would know how to figure out what exactly that would mean. As I can't notice that at any point of this planet anyone is being bothered at all that much to recognize the civilizational standards in suitably responsible manner as a point of navigation, they certainly are trying to all very much look after the Oscar at any time. Should we call that civilization of awareness at the point of gained authority for higher planetary manipulations, that is management, and principal decision making of the planetary levels? Would any of these words sound as a joke? Well, they have been taken as a joke for quite some time, and as I speak, everyone is after money, money, and money, and at the moment they get them, neither they know how to manage them, neither they know what to do with them. Yet the fact is that native New Zealand jumped in the kitchen of the native fabric of life form of the territories and replaced both characters with closer to monkey grounds. Speaking of Adam and Eve. It would be wrong even to say monkey here, let's say rather sober, because we really don't know how romantic monkeys are. Maybe they are more romantic than we would know. Should I say sensible and observatory and wise than running after wealth and higher drive like crazy? And all of the interference happened via socialism, which clearly by now everyone should understand does have very strong British embryo, and that would lead into Commonwealth, which would have been providing the genetic ground for complete refabrication of our territories, our ancient lands as well. And that is why today we have two very confronting branches there. The original vibes and lately introduced via Yugoslavia, completely artificial bank of identities that are much more predatory and equally more numb in the way they deliver on the ground, in the way how they deploy their sensitivity and so on, and certainly mitigate with actual real historic heritage dimensions, which on these territories became rather illusion, something that we need to yet recover before we can talk about it, with some kind of sense of stronger presence and knowing exactly and precisely what we would be talking about. I found myself as a foreigner on these territories as well, and what is even more terrifying, they could not have even a clue how to recognize me or to find themselves relating to my presence and to what kind of character I am, but rather with evidently present inclination to mispresent my character, to bury me in as possible harsh circumstances. And here I reach the notion of Germany as a point of identification that we talk about when we talk about ancient practice. I end to be foreigner on territories where reality is they are foreigners to the territories themselves. Another assessment of the situation there is the fact that it cannot be ignored the intervention of Commonwealth territories in the refabrication of the entire ancient territory, all the way to Israel. I'm going to find that as biggest crime of all, the genetic refabrication of territories. It is not to be diminished fact that the territories will have a weight of their own ancient population and pagan practices which rank on levels of paganism of the highest level, dangerous levels, but none of the rest of the territories of this world can be released from such assessments when in question historic heritage intervening on the territories, bringing additional burden and more confusion to any attempt to detangle affairs at certain point of time, which should be matter of regional management rather than intervention in private lives here. Communication, clarification, and engaging of population would be the correct approach, not handling population either as some kind of chickens, sheep, or similar. I'm going to find this as a critical point where we start human civilization of the present times by standards of the present times, and I bring that as a lighthouse of today, not relieving anyone for their own chunk of responsibility. I'm going to find as the highest crime at all. Yet, this genetic intervention on territories over their historic heritages with the lowest level of human sensitivity, where in overall civilizational consensus continue to think foolishly and madly that they are on same kind of race where they are entitled to race. I'm going to find that overall planetary madness. I heard someone yesterday in regard of description of characters of members of Illuminati as they have preference to speak in some mega expressions, in some kind of fanatic way of expressing themselves, as they are above other people or they are more important than other people. The fact is that they are being generated from the bank of principal imperial bloodlines. They have not been generated from genetic bank of regular people. Would they think that way if they had been positions as some kind of ordinaries in the societies in the previous times? We can only argue, I'm arguing here, how far they, the one playing gods behind the curtains, have managed to carnage the actual genetic banks, but also to deprive them from their own history and their own rights to live with the knowledge of who they are, rather of whom they are, rather than to be manipulated as some kind of bulls on the field and then they be blamed for being such bulls. Well, their being born of the breed, would that not be more logical perception, by the way? Someone was talking about some people being filthy. Would you not notice things in the way how you should be noticing them? Do you really think that this world is supposed to be shaped upon your wish list here? Even if I have been born with much in Adam and Eve protocol, with that much Even if I have been born that much in Adam and Eve protocol by being born from the principal imperial bloodline lands, it is fact that someone just decided to carnage the bloodlines and then to play plus and minus with them, to play them on one against another. It would explain why me and my husband, for example, look similar in terms of our preferences to some point of being over-annoyed even by each other's similarity in presence, yet at the same time existing in completely different body formation and different personality driver, where we end up with two opposites of the same matter. That is what has not been explained properly here, the meaning of the same matter. I am not going to say that anything of that would have anything to do with gender, but with personality of an identity, and then that goes into positive and negative manifestations as being translated into wolf and sheep or goat, and driven one as a creative and positive, the other as destructive and negative, which actually exceeds here wolf-sheep description to the extent that I would not find wolf as synonym for negative. In human version, we get here different performances, accordingly driven as such. What is successful to one, to the other is failure, and then driving the one that is failure as a damaging factor over the one that is successful. All being done by splitting the personality into two parts of positive and negative, and fighting the same personality between different physical portfolios. That is Adam and Eve protocol, and the initial platform here is principle of main imperial bloodline. Forget about gender, we talk about higher accounts here. that someone wanted to demolish and that someone admitted to demolish such accounts by reaching the genetic formation of the breeding of the other worlds. In the other words. So in old-fashioned way, that would be very much breeding one family and kids of one family with completely opposing bioidentities, with opposing cultural identities. I would think that such matters would happen naturally during the length of time if not careful management employed over the bloodlines, but fact is careful management was employed over the bloodlines as to present days. Yet that careful management was deprived in its substance and is ill-mannered, was deviated in its substance and is ill-mannered. And then it goes. If you would like to move on the left side or on the right side of the equation, is it going to make a difference? Yes, of course it's going to make a difference. This is something we can argue about. As what weight will need to be noticed here, what difference someone wants to find here, and what difference someone continue to expect to find out of certain identity on their next generation, and that is where we talk about devaluation of principal bloodlines. Which way to go? Excuse me, we have to notice here the protocol of devaluation of principal bloodlines. That's not the question, that's the answer. Nothing here when being made a reference to left side of the equation was just simple discussion of question of freedom to write with left hand or with right hand, but with the fact that it has been launched very developed and very popular approach on the planet to go against the stream and excel yet including yourself in the world of wrongdoing. Finding yourself in the world of wrongdoing. No matter how mystically or romantically declared as alternative it sounds, Neverland or Magic Land or whatever in substance we talk about, criminal. In substance we talk about criminal association and criminal behavior. We talk about mafia behavior. We talk about less going away with more, less effort, less knowledge, less skill, less virtue, less morale, less ethic, less correct answer, going away with more reward, more in positioning, more power. So it is a madness on its own, and I'm going to set it as a number one, as first place of issue. It's just the biggest madness on the planet that continues to roll on with the sense of normality, with the sense of undeniable normality. These are the parameters on which the entire Western society today exists. So you will notice this is nothing to do with politics even. This is not even political. This is conceptual, and you will never detect it if you don't employ conceptual approach. That would be a reason why people of my kind became that much extinct, which also will need to demonstrate the size and the scope of this approach playing on the planet as we speak, translate it into some kind of political format, as some kind of political dress code, and everyone's finding themselves thinking that they are defending political positions, while actually they are defending criminal mafia, taking positions on the planet on principal civilizational count, and they are just part of it. Principle 22. The notion of bird empire. In the resolution of the entire matter, it will need to be recognized here the underlying disposition of the bird empire as much more a real or objective political and cultural realm, which should be recognized as actual political setting in contemporary political theory, because it will provide a much more correct platform for its real political interventionism or advisory by recognizing actual dynamic and character of the region or planet for that matter. What we have today is occupation of entire historic territory and overwriting of its actual energy rather than to be developing on its own heritage and allowed to deal with its own issues in most appropriate and contemporary ways. As today we are all moving towards a much more reasonable global perspective where each of the nations are bringing more capital on the global platforms and further advance, the occupied territories aimed to be as enslaved, available to global capital to overrule them rather than to be ruled by, or at least coordinated by. It is absolutely inappropriate to offer such occupied territories to global capital to use them for advancing of their territories. Such globalization is even much more wrong than some naturally developed imperialistic setting that at least will be bringing much more developed expertise and meaningful advancements for the development of territories when such levels of perception accomplished. United Nations today basically would inherit such setting rather than to be accepted some oil derivation perspective. The bird, in political terms, would mean empire with two wings, but as a symbol would actually be in reference to intelligence of type, as we used to say, flying mind that tend to generate different perceptions of reality than ordinary people in ways we would refer as to romanticism, but also appears to be very close to concept of overall intelligence in the way how Leonardo da Vinci or Newton have appeared, for example. I would go one step forward here to assume that the entire concept of angels or archangels would have been built on such platform and sold to us as some version of creatures from another world. Unless we assume they have emerged here on earth as fallen from sky, which again would be rather defining of life of earth anyway. The fact is that such dimensions appear as much more humane platform than it has been culturally recognized. We need here all to agree, that these are kind of people that walk among us and are so much part of the entire notion of human civilization that cannot be even split from the rest of humans. Yet someone obviously is promoting an entire event while harshly and very persistently trying to split this kind of people from the rest of humanity and then use them as slaves, as special kind of slaves in category of angels or even fallen angels, one whose spine have managed to break and use completely for dark affairs. It becomes unavoidably to ask who is playing God here on earth and obviously doing very bad job out of it. We can identify so far structures made out of financiers and theater players, tribes directly. They have managed today to create very strong platform of ultimate criminal affairs on earth and lost any sense of real political leadership if ever there was such ambition among such circles. I would assume they have never managed to prevail as real force for problem solving. As higher they got, more would be there to lose. So close, and so far away. I also have to notice here that the symbol, the bird symbol, also very much depict the continent, the Asia-European continent actually. It is completely reflecting the terrain. And in very substantial part of historic development of that region, there were empires that were having their east and west wing, either Byzantine or Roman Empire. But I want to point out here that the symbol continues to have a rather territorial reference than political. Either when comes to be noticed the region, the fabric of the region itself, geographic region, which means developed trade, routing, cultural connectivity, cultural or economic or any kind of interconnection, developed traditionally relationships of long-term friendships, bloodlines, crossing bloodlines. So we talk about continent that is largest and the most active continent on the planet. On the other side, the symbol refers to overseeing or mind that oversee as a matter of managing and matter of ruling, commanding or indicating here that the approach that would have been taken in all of the time of historic developments would be the look from the above, overseeing, managing something in most responsible manner. That would be opposing today, or will be rather very opposite to a very modern approach of over-nationalized over-national sentiment, promoting today their national platforms without developing enough sense or reason of importance of proper coordination without antagonizing territories that can hardly function in antagonized mode. Here I especially talk about Europe, that continue to take over the entire Euro news and have thrown Russians outside of Europe. First of all, when I turn on television to listen Euro news, I would not like to hear people talking against Russia as it is not part of Europe. Russia is part of Europe. So you will need as Europeans to confront that you are today existing in extremely polarized sentiment on your own European continent. You can't find that sentiment even in Africa, not even in South America. But the size of your conflicting over-politicized stupidity when it comes to Russia is hard to understand. It makes me to question what makes you to think that you are principal European subject to begin with, when we have just established that the entire history relies solidly on mega platforms and mega flags. And Russia, in that context, does not walk last. In contrary, that would be yourself. I'm talking here about what it takes to project proper political competence, to project, I don't want to use too much reference to political, proper civilizational conduct. What it takes to promote suitable, relevant civilizational perspective in given historic, in given time, in most responsible manner. But talking from position of some kind of mushroom houses is not going to give us Europe in the way how we want to record it, and the way how we want to declare it today to the world. No matter what are the problems, in other words, no matter what are your problems with Europe, with Russia, you have to solve them. You have to have proper, proactive approach to solve them. But you do not have right to take over Europe on your side and to speak in the name of Europe in exclusive manner. That is simply unacceptable. And are you waiting someone else to come and solve your European issues? Are you waiting for someone else to come and solve your European issues? Who is that one that you're waiting for? Why you just don't spell it out? Why you just don't spell that out properly? But to call Americans to assist you confronting Russia, which is part of Europe, it is as Americans to call you so they are going to solve their issues with Texas or South American territories. That's never going to happen. The moment you bring your army out there from another territory, they are going to claim whatever they are going to claim. You have already plenty on your shoulders. How about you start from identity question? Therefore, we are talking about European continent. Are you going to conclude today that Russians are out of Europe? And would you have right to say so? It might be the solutions are harder, but then we are the one claiming the human, are we not? Since when human is driving on the easy mode, get a notebook and start the hard work. rather than walking on the television set like you're a movie star, not a politician? Or should we just notice again what really politicians are? Just secretaries. So where is your principal work exactly situated? There you are on daily basis, clowning yourself with the latest political comments. Where on earth is your principal positioning at this very moment? As Europeans, I'm going to bet right now that Africans are having better defined political perceptions than you. Political identity, principality, that is, than Europe as we speak. Full stop. Principle 23. Ancient DNA bank has been used for creation palette of global leaders within the notion of Arthur. How much are humans worth the truth? What we could have noticed on this journey. What is their nature like? What is their face like? Principle 24. Strong presence of tribunal cultural influences. Identified strong presence of tribunal cultural influences over global affairs, especially escalating in last century with the developing of 2 world wars and couple of very heavy regimes that someone wanted to assign all to Serbs, obviously. Notice here that would be the same center of the global flower. I would not call this only obsession, but lack of imagination, dullness, and narrow-mindedness. Real intelligence never repeats itself, although it can be traced. The degree of creativity is much higher, and also real intelligence never reaches its final design. It always searches for new answers. These structures are using passing time. Slowly is for some of them to spend actually my life while under excuse of doing work for me. It is to be noticed the structure of the word office here. The burning candle syndrome of not having power to do much or solve much. Principle 25. The concept of bioextremism. It has been identified as withheld within the roots of various national cultural identities, where it is being noticed the pattern of exploitation versus more valuable properties. Such pattern today exists as versus some specific territories, while in substance would be versus specific properties. The prevailing theory among the masses is that they withhold the rights to the planet and everything different of them would be foreign, where they defend their opposite positions versus such identities and yet categorize themselves as of such cultural identity. Accordingly, masses most often went into mode of declaring such properties on blank ticket without being set standard scale where it will be established how much they would deserve to call upon such cultural identity. These are two major issues here accordingly, the different identities and the existing relationship among them on same territory. Most probably it would be in question what we call today cultural diversity, where it will need to be recognized the substance of such diversity and the existing relationships. My pledge here is not to allow any culture to walk over another, yet we will need to establish the wrongdoing that was going on so far, and also this is ongoing pattern of building world of increasingly wrong relations and cultural values. It is also being recognized that solution to such situation has been deliberately left to escalate, so the scooping can be bigger obviously, and that particular tactics that dominated last century with world wars will need to be detected today. I would recognize build-up of prime conscience as Tower of Pisa, literally. Even if some bioextremism has happened as a result of some cataclysm, we cannot give to that supreme positions, but have to recognize it as condition of earth in very properly defined and responsible manner. Whatever is the situation, we have to deal with it as a world. Principle 26. Notion of temple in absolute terms. As symbolizing accordingly the existence, the reflection of the personality or culture when it evolves or reflects higher values, within its specific cultural personality features. Temple would reflect accordingly higher cultural identity, which means principal personality. From how people will start relating to such personality will emerge culture. So if some personality ended to be driven unhappy, they would have been reflecting dark personality, yet we would not be sure about the actual personal features in question. It has been also established that some people are much more withdrawn or workaholics, that very often would create hesitation of the masses to accept such people, and they tend to further isolate them instead to help them to integrate in the society, or at least not to hold them for what they are not. Today we have also established that we need to move away from our past confusion, instead to continue to drag such settings that would not work for anyone when primitive and wrongly understood. Building positive relationships and understanding each other on more correct terms should be our walk ahead. Of course, there is much more to be said in this context. I just want to point out here, from my personal perspective, what I found as a critical issue. We usually would find that in order to bring this scope of leadership which rely on analytical, on such profound analytical work, one need really time to simply do the work, which is rather reaching level of scientific work, and that require serious level of isolation. Now, if you don't have a team that is going to deal with relationship, with public relationships, we might end up being victim of your own identity, of your own and your own work, and in long term, the humanity end up uh, building wrong knowledge, wrong database about its own cultural development. I'm not sure that we today as a world have even understood this world even understood what is the real profile of real leadership, of real leader. So that is what I want to point at in this instance. Rather than to discuss temple as matter of historic occurrence, which would belong to history. Principle 27, the notion of black and white. I'm realizing that on West lands, knowledge has been understood as some dark zone. Schools are dark, weather is dark. Harry Potter resembles such attitude of West towards schooling, while someone is well packing the knowledge into form of witchery and similar dark and other very unattractive packaging. I just wondered, would it not be here black actually standing for cloudy, and as such reflecting such character as new normal and new standard for the entire global world? So I do not believe here very much in reference to skin color as much as I would notice a reference to sunshine characters or positive characters, and characters that appear as never happy, never satisfied, always grumpy, and very inclined to throw on you the darkness of the cloudy existence. Yes, I would replace black and white with sunny characters and cloudy characters, as characters that appear as never happy. We already have noticed enormous influence of English aristocracy in crafting the world in last 500 years, especially since reign of Elizabeth I and emergence of British Empire. So the British weather or the English weather should be taken into consideration, and the fact that the entire series of Harry Potter movies happened in very cloudy, dark scenography, very ambitious to begin the new millennium of the entire planet, still very much defined by the sunshine of our beautiful sun and joy of life emerging as a result. So I'm going to question how correct it is to ignore this particular momentum. I will notice, however, that such characters are not only associated to British weather, but are to be found all over prime territories, starting from Japan onwards. Mongolia, for example, still very much fond of their oppressive history, instead of still very much walking somewhere in Serbia as stupidity of comprehending leading position and leading right to present own characters and personality as imperial setting, promoting negativity as a dominance and advancement. And here black emerges not as a skin color, but as a color of character, and that is important to be noticed today as well. In that context, by the way, I would notice that African population, because of its exposure to sun, we can notice South American population equally, although would say have darker skin, actually bring such positivism and such uplifting life energy that one can have the problem to call that black. Yet stereotypes on this planet are existing exactly on parameters on black and white, following the skin color, and that continued to be uh, um, prevailing and blindly ignored. That the negative is not exactly a black skin, and positive is not exactly the white skin. Where in substance we need to discuss the temper, the nature, the style, and the character of human itself. Principle 28, playing theater on the civilizational stage, is another phenomenon where we need to pay attention to such setting or Disneyland. Principle 29, principle of David, Davidi, to see, I notice, I understand. Initial prerequisite to any true leadership. Hidden conflict, detailed information gathering versus perception of actual phenomenon of movements of historic plateaus through the times and actual dimension accordingly of the letter I. Principle 30. Atlantis effect, Tarzan platform. Round table, round as physical feature of a body, in reference from the legend of Aladdin lamp. We have to see here Aladdin as a Aladdin, a cold, as resemblance of heritage that yet will need to be recognized as principal or secondary. I would see the entire matter as later development on the stages of re-engineering to Adam and Eve, that then ended to build conflicting cultural settings, obviously to the present days.